Okay, so guess we're live. Time to get going. Reading this, catching up. My this endurance effort has led me to be tired on the alt day, a little bit fatigued. So that means my circuits aren't used to it enough to be comfortable, which means they're putting a lot of effort into watching it. They're having to form new exploratory circuitry. So clearly, no clear line of demarcation has as yet been drawn between species and subspecies. That is, the forms which, in the opinion of some naturalists, come very near to. Sorry, I'm just adjusting something. I need to be able to see the time. While watching back, I noticed the time. You know what? Not important. That is, certainly no clear line of demarcation has yet been drawn between species and subspecies. That is, the forms which, in the opinion of some naturalists, come very near to, but do not quite arrive at the rank of species, or again, between subspecies and well-marked varieties, or between lesser varieties and individual differences. These differences blend into each other in an insensible series, and a series impresses the mind with the idea of an actual passage. Hence, I look at individual differences, though of small interest to the systematists, as of high importance for us, as being the first step towards such slight varieties as are barely thought worth recording in works on natural history. And I look at varieties which are in any degree more distinct and permanent, as steps leading to more strongly marked and more permanent varieties. At these later, as leading to subspecies and to species. The passage from one stage of difference to another and higher stage may be, in some cases, due merely to the long continued action of different physical conditions in two different regions. But I have not much faith in this view, and I have attributed the passage of a variety from a state in which it varies very slightly from its parents to one in which it differs more, to the action of natural selection and accumulating, as will hereafter be more fully explained. Differences of structure in certain definite directions. Hence, I believe, a well-marked variety may be called an incipient species, but whether this belief be justifiable must be judged by the general weight of the several facts and views given throughout this work. It need not be supposed that all varieties in incipient species necessarily attain the rank of species. They may, whilst in this incipient state, become extinct, or they may endure as varieties for very long periods, as has been shown to be the case by Mr. Wollaston, with the varieties of certain fossil land shells in the Madeira. If a variety were to flourish so as to exceed in numbers as the parent species, it would then rank as the species, and the species as the variety, or it might come to supplant and exterminate the parent species, or both might coexist, and both rank as independent species. But we shall hereafter have to return to this subject. From these remarks, it will be seen that I look at the term species as one arbitrarily given for the sake of convenience to a set of individuals closely resembling each other, and that it does not essentially differ from the term variety, which is given to less distinct and more fluctuating forms. The term variety, again, in comparison with mere individual differences, is also applied arbitrarily and for mere convenience sake. Guided by theoretical considerations, I thought that some interesting results might be obtained in regard to the nature of relations of the species which vary most, by tabulating all the varieties in several well-known floras. At first, this seemed a simple task, but Mr. H.C. Watson, to whom I am much indebted for valuable advice and assistance on this subject, soon convinced me that there were many difficulties, as did subsequently Dr. Hooker, even in stronger terms. I shall reserve for my future works the discussion of these difficulties, and the tables themselves of the proportional numbers of the varying species. Dr. Hooker permits me to add that after having carefully read my manuscript and examined the tables, he thinks that the following statements are fairly well established. The whole subject, however, treated as it necessarily here is, with much brevity, is rather perplexing, and allusions cannot be avoided to the struggle for existence, divergence of character, and other questions hereafter to be discussed. Alph de Condol and others have shown that plants which have very wide ranges generally present varieties, and this might have been expected as they become exposed to diverse physical conditions, and as they come into competition, which, as we shall hereafter see, is a far more important circumstance, with different sets of organic beings. But my tables further show that in any limited country, the species which are most common, that is, abound most in individuals, and the species which are most widely diffused in their own country, and this is a different consideration from the wide range, and to a certain extent from commonness, often give rise to varieties sufficiently well marked to have been recorded in botanical works. Hence, it is the most flourishing, or as they may be called, the dominant species. Those which range widely over the world are the most diffused in their own country, and are the most numerous in individuals, which oftenest produce well-marked varieties, or, as I consider them, incipient species. This, perhaps, might have been anticipated, for, as varieties, in order to become any degree permanent, necessarily have to struggle with the other inhabitants of the country. The species which are already dominant will be the most likely to yield offspring, which, through some slight degree modified, still inherit those advantages that enabled their parents to become dominant over their compatriots. If the plants inhabiting a country and described in any flora be divided into two equal masses, all those in the larger genre being placed on one side, and all those in the smaller genre on the other side, a somewhat larger number of the very common and much diffused or dominant species will be found on the side of the larger genre. This again might have been anticipated, for the mere fact of many species of the same genus inhabiting any country shows that there is something in the organic or inorganic conditions of that country favorable to the genus, and consequently, we might have expected to have found in the larger genre, or those including many species, a large proportional number of dominant species. But so many causes tend to obscure this result, that I am surprised that my tables show even a small majority on the side of larger genre. I will here allude to only causes of obscurity. Freshwater and salt-loving plants have generally very wide ranges and are much diffused, but this seems to be connected with the nature of the stations inhabited by them, and has little or no relation to the size of the genre in which the species belong. Again, plants low in the scale of organization are generally more widely diffused than plants higher in the scale, and here again there is no close relation to the size of the genre. The cause of lowly organized plants ranging widely will be discussed in our chapter on geographical distribution. From looking at species as only strongly marked and well-defined varieties, I was led to anticipate that the species of the larger genre in each country would oftener present varieties than the species of the smaller genre. For whenever many closely related species, i.e., species of the same genus, have been formed, many varieties or incipient species ought, as a general rule, to be now forming. Where many large trees grow, we expect to find saplings. Where many species of a genus have been formed through variation, circumstances have been favorable for variation. And hence we might expect that the circumstances would generally be still favorable to variation. On the other hand, if we look at each species as a special act of creation, there is no apparent reason why more varieties should occur in a group having many species than in one having few. To test the truth of this anticipation, I have arranged the plants of 12 countries, and the Coleopterus insects of two distinct districts into two nearly equal masses, the species of the larger genre on one side and those of the smaller genre on the other side, and it is invariably proved to be the case that a larger proportion of the species on the side of the larger genre presents varieties than on the side of the smaller genre. Moreover, the species of the large genre which present any varieties invariably present a larger average number of varieties than do the species of the small genre. Both these results follow when another division is made, and when all the smallest genre, with from only 1 to 4 species, are absolutely excluded from the tables. These facts are of a plain signification on the view that species are only strongly marked and permanent varieties. For wherever many species of the same genus have been formed, or where, if we may use the expression, the manufactory of species has been active, we ought generally to find the manufactory still in action. More especially as we have every reason to believe the process of manufacturing new species to be a slow one. And this certainly is the case. If varieties be looked at as incipient species, for my tables clearly show as a general rule that wherever many species of the genus have been formed, the species of that genus present a number of varieties, that is, of an incipient species beyond the average. It is not that all large genera are now varying much, and are thus increasing in the number of their species, or that no small genera are now varying and increasing, for if this has been so, it would have been fatal to my theory, inasmuch as geology plainly tells us that small genera have in the lapse of time often increased greatly in size, and that large genera have often come to their maxima, declined, and disappeared. All that we want to show is that where many species of a genus have been found, on average, many are still forming, and this holds good. There are other relations between the species of large genera and the recorded varieties which deserve notice. We have seen that there is no infallible criterion by which to distinguish species in well-marked varieties, and in those cases in which intermediate links have not been found between doubtful forms, naturalists are compelled to come to a determination by the amount of difference between them, judging by analogy whether or not the amount suffices to raise one or both to the rank of species. Hence, the amount of difference is one of very important criterion in settling whether two forms should be ranked as species or varieties. Now, Fries has remarked in regard to plants, and Westwood regard to insects, that in large genera the amount of difference between the species is often exceedingly small. I have endeavored to test this numerically by averages, and as far as my imperfect results go, they confirm the view. I have also consulted some sagacious and experienced observers, and after deliberation they concur in this view. In this respect, therefore, the species of the large genre resembles varieties more than do the species of the smaller genre. Or the case may be put in another way, and it may be said that in the larger genre, in which a number of varieties and recipient species greater than the average are now manufactured, many of the species already manufactured still to a certain extent resemble varieties, or they differ from each other by a less than usual amount of difference. Moreover, the species of the large genre are related to each other, in the same manner as the varieties of any one species are related to each other. No naturalist pretends that all the species of a genus are equally distinct from each other. They may generally be divided into subgenre or sections, or lesser groups. As Fries has well remarked, little groups of species are generally clustered like satellites around certain other species. And what are varieties but groups of forms, unequally related to each other and clustered around certain forms, that is, around their parent species. Undoubtedly there is one most important point of difference between varieties and species, namely, that the amount of difference between varieties when compared with each other or with the parent species is much less than that between the species of the same genus. But when we come to discuss the principle, as I call it, of divergence of character, we shall see how this may be explained, and how the lesser differences between varieties will tend to increase into the greater differences between species. This is one other point which seems to me worth notice. Varieties generally have much restricted ranges. This statement is indeed scarcely more than a truism, for if a variety were found to have a wider range than that of its supposed parent species, their denominations ought to be reversed. But there is also reason to believe that those species which are very closely allied to other species, and in so far resemble varieties, often much restricted ranges. For instance, Mr. H.C. Watson has marked for me in the well-sifted London Catalogue of Plants, 4th edition, 63 plants, which are therein ranked as species, but which he considers as so closely allied to other species as to be doubtful of the value. These 63 reputed species range on average over 6.9 of the provinces in which Mr. Watson has divided Great Britain. Now in the same catalogue, 53 acknowledged varieties are recorded. and these range over 7.7 provinces, whereas the species to which these varieties belong range over 14.3 provinces. So that the acknowledged varieties have very nearly the same restricted average range as have those very closely allied forms, marked for me by Mr. Watson as doubtful species, but which are almost universally ranked by British botanists as good and true species. Finally then, varieties have the same general character as species, for they cannot be, oh I just realized, I'm scrolling it off the screen, cannot be distinguished from species, especially firstly by the discovery of intermediate linking forms, and the occurrence of such links cannot affect the actual characters of the forms, which they connect, and except secondly by a certain amount of difference for two forms, if differing very little, are generally ranked as varieties, notwithstanding that intermediate linking forms have not been discovered. From the amount of difference considered necessary to give two forms the rank of species is quite indefinite. In genera, having more than the average number of species in any country, the species of these genera have more than the average number of varieties. In large genera, the species are apt to be closely but unequally allied together, forming little clusters around certain species. Species are closely allied to other species, apparently have restricted ranges. In all these several respects, the species of large genera present a strange analogy with varieties, and we can clearly understand these analogies. The species have once existed as varieties and have thus originated, whereas these analogies are utterly inexplicable if each species has been independently created. We have also seen that it is the most flourishing or dominant species of the larger genre, which on average vary most, and varieties, as we shall hereafter see, tend to become converted into new and distinct species. Larger genera thus tend to become larger, and throughout the forms of life which are now dominant tend to become still more dominant, by letting many modify and dominant descendants. But by steps hereafter to be explained, the larger genera also tend to break up into smaller genera, and thus the forms of life throughout the universe become divided into groups subordinate to groups. I think this is a good spot to leave off, cut it early, start the discussion, especially since I'm considering adding a fourth book to the repertoire. If I get into the habit of cutting early, occasionally I'll be able to introduce another document sooner. Well, let's get to it. So species. So the note was the differences between different varieties, just about the differences, mostly the slight little things that make the differences. How do I cover this? By judging through the different varieties, there was a touch to note on parent species and the subordinate categories that orbit them. Okay. So yeah, it's like we have restaurants. That would be your genre, and you have the different restaurants, which all the corporate ones maybe satellite those, and the small businesses satellite those as different incipient species and different varieties off of that. So you have fast food would be an incipient species, and then the different fast food chains would be your different varieties, and your dominant fast food chains are like the super corporate ones, and the incipient species would be the ones that break off from that. You don't see big businesses splitting up though, they tend to congregate together and evolve into one organism. But as an organism that's under natural selection, they are a parent organism, so it's like the survival of the fittest, right? But we haven't gotten to that section yet. Uh, Many modified and dominant descendants. So, one McDonald's operates in a certain capacity, has three descendants, and one of them perhaps has a certain style of operation that leads it to become the dominant one, and it takes over, and that's what spreads. It's like when you go to, there are still a few Dairy Queens that have yet to modernize to their current style. But the current style comes from somewhere. You start, perhaps, the corporations probably actively do it to a degree, trying different styles, and then whatever one takes is the one that, yeah, so it's a combination between natural selection and selective selection. They put out a bunch of different varieties in different places, perhaps in different countries, and the style that works best with their branding, they roll out to all of their stores. It's like, and the franchise stores are a different animal. So if one franchise store does particularly well, it's likely the corporation is going to follow their lead in a way, and those would be the dominance taking over from the parent species. The parent species being just the brand. I think Dairy Queen's a good example because I've been to many Dairy Queens that have many different styles. There was definitely lots of individual ability to choose when it was a franchise, and that has shown out because most of them are very different. It's a very common, very common incipient species. With banks being a much older organism, the way they operate, and almost all banks are the same now. So the dominant species, you still have different varieties, but they're all the same species. And perhaps some of the new smaller banks that take from their parent have a chance. PayPal is an example of a natural phenomena. They don't do loans and stuff, so I guess that doesn't quite count as a bank per se. Governments and restaurants are an excellent example just to do the obvious variety. Manufacturers, and I'll touch specifically on auto manufacturers, there used to be loads, and of course the dominant ones took over, and they interbred a little bit, so they must have been, to a degree, what you would call varieties, and they took ideas from each other, and they intercrossed, and best ideas proved out, and all vehicles are the same, where there's much less variety in modern times within the automotive market, and this parent species have definitely taken hold, although there are still some variations between the species, and the dominance is still being competed for. Electronics, we definitely see inheritance, like the touch screen phone. They all inherited from Apple, and there's plenty of similarities that have been inherited, and the dominant species is the phone, camera, apps on your home screen, so you have different buttons to press. Even apps have a certain form and function. You scroll them like a scroll. So there's been a serious evolution in the character down to our technologies and the organizations that create those technologies, of course, and the parent species and different varieties, and the satellite groups. So you have your phones as a satellite group coming from the desktop, laptops. You have touchpads and phones, consoles, televisions. All these are the different satellite subspecies. Television has become so much different from. Well, of course, now they're even becoming intelligent to a degree, or having intelligent technology added to them. So it's a very technical in our technical productions, we see the evolution of varieties, and in our organization structures, we see it as well. Uh, Media channels all seem to follow different. There's a few different main ones, and the ones that make the most money in the dirtiest ways have been outcompeted by other ones, and now those other ones, they've used that dirty money and gotten greedy, some of the smaller ones, and started pushing on the bigger media channels, as a result popping up new ones. So the most successful inheritance will be Twitch and VLive. Twitch is, as soon as they started becoming a little bit more corrupt and filtering the channel, they became, instead of being a platform, they became a channel, a publisher. Facebook has become a publisher. They're still fairly popular. There's alternatives that have popped up. Snapchat has been emulated and bred into the other social media as a variety that popped up, and the dominant strategy and method and form has led to a predominance in the market of that. Even YouTube has adopted the Snapchat form and function with our I think I see it happening with our businesses as well. As soon as like with Uber and Lyft, I see a labor market equivalent of Uber where you just go to work for, say, a week at a time, a temping agency like Uber. So businesses put up, we need this many laborers, and the app provides labor for the day, trained labor if you have a training program, whatever, for the day, but no one's committed long term to any business, because that adaptability for the employee, the adaptability for, and the access to employees for the business. And our generation has, and it's like this lockdown has exemplified it. They are, like, 2 people quit and it was news in Penticton, and I was like, oh fuck, no shit, they quit. They worked overtime and got barely any pay. Like, people don't, we created a false economy dependent on desperation, and now you have to deal with the local supply and demand, and these businesses can't afford it because they've become dependent on this false economy, and locals don't want to do the work because they can't survive to a reasonable standard, a culturally applicable standard off that. The people who do are living with somebody else, or they have some form of ability that something that gives them the ability to live below the poverty line. They have some supplement of a sort somewhere that makes it possible. So and that's the evolution of these things is producing this serious impact. Okay. I've lost internet. According to this, I'm live, but according to... I was worried I would have to try and find where I was. Publius Cornelius Tacitus, corruption, causes of corrupt eloquence. Tell me I'm still alive. I thought I lost it. To oppose the torrent that bore down everything, the danger of losing all fair and honest fame was the only circumstance that could afford a ray of hope. But even that slender fence was soon removed by the arts of Legius Licinius. He was the first that opened a new road to ambition. He intrigued for fame and filled the benches with an audience suborned to applaud his declamation. He had his circle around him, and shouts of approbation followed. It was upon that occasion that Demetrius Afer emphatically said, "Eloquence is now at the last gasp." It had, indeed, at that time shown manifest symptoms of decay, but its total ruin may be dated from the introduction of a mercenary band to flatter and applaud. If we accept a chosen few whose superior genius has not as yet been seduced from the truth in nature, the rest are followed by their partisans, like actors on the stage, subsisting altogether on the thought suffrages of mean and prostitute hirelings. Nor is this sordid traffic carried on with secrecy. We see the bargain made in the face of the court. The bribe is distributed with as little ceremony as if there were in a private party or at the orator's own house. Having sold their voices, this venal crew rush forward from one tribunal to another, the distributors of fame and the sole judges of literary merit. The practice is, no doubt, disgraceful. To brand it with infamy, two new terms have been invented, one in the Greek language, importing the vendors of praise, and the other in the Latin idiom, signifying the parasites who sell their applause for a supper. But sarcastic expressions have not been able to cure the mischief. The applauders by profession have taken courage, and the name, which has intended as a stroke of ridicule, has now become an honorable appellation. This infamous practice rages at present with increasing violence. The party no longer consists of free-born citizens. Our very slaves are hired, even before they arrive at full age. We see them distributing the rewards of eloquence, without attending to what is said, and without sense enough to understand. They are sure to crowd the courts of justice. Whenever a raw young man, stung with love of fame, but without talents to deserve it, obtrudes himself in the character of an advocate, the hall resounds with acclamations, or rather with a kind of bellowing, for I know not by what term to express that savage uproar which would disgrace a theatre. Upon the whole, when I consider these infamous practices, which have been brought so much dishonor upon a liberal profession, I am far from wondering that you, Returnus, judged it time to sound your retreat. When you could no longer attend with honor, you did well, my friend, to devote yourself entirely to the muses, and now, since you are too close to the debate, permit me to request that, besides unfolding the causes of corrupt eloquence, you will fairly tell us whether you entertain any hopes of better times, and if you do, by what means a reformation may be accomplished. It is true, said Returnus, that seeing the forum deluged by an inundation of vices, I was glad, as my friend expressed, to sound my retreat. I saw corruption rushing on with hasty strides, too shameful to be defended, and too powerful to be resisted. And yet, though urged by all those motives, I should hardly have renounced the business of the bar, if the bias of my nature had not inclined me to other studies. I balanced, however, for some time. It was at first my fixed resolution to stand to the last a poor remnant of that integrity of manly eloquence, which still lingered at the bar, and showed some signs of life. It was my intention to emulate, not indeed with equal powers, but certainly with equal firmness, the bright models of ancient times, and in that course of practice to define the fortunes, the dignity, and the innocence of my fellow citizens. But the strong impulse of inclination was not to be resisted. I laid down my arms, and deserted to the safe and tranquil camp of the Muses. But though a deserter, I have not quite forgot the service in which I was enlisted. I honored the professors of real eloquence, and that sentiment, I hope, will always warm in my heart. In my solitary walks and moments of meditation, it often happens that I fall into a train of thinking on the flourishing state of ancient eloquence, and the abject condition to which it is reduced in modern times. The result of my reflections I shall venture to unfold, not with a spirit of controversy, nor yet dogmatically to enforce my own opinion. I may differ in some points from a collision of sentiments. It is possible that some new light may be struck out. My friend of parable, therefore, excuse me if I do not with him prefer the false glitter of the moderns to the solid vigor of ancient genius. At the same time, it is not my intention to disparage his friends. Masada, whom you, Secundus, have closely followed, will forgive me if I do not, in everything, coincide with his opinion. The vices of the forum, which you have both, as becomes men of integrity, attacked with vehemence, will not have me for their apologist. but I still may be allowed to ask, have not you been too much exasperated against the rhetoricians? I will not say in their favor that I think them equal to the task of reviving the honors of eloquence, but I have known among them men of unblemished morals, of regular discipline, great erudition, and talents every way fit to form the minds of youth, to a just taste for science and the persuasive arts. In this number, one in particular has lately shone forth with superior luster. From his abilities, all that is in the power of man may fairly be expected. A genius like his would have been the ornament of better times. Posterity will admire and honor him, and yet would not have Secundus amuse himself with ill-grounded hopes. Neither the learning of that most excellent man, or the industry of such as may follow him, will be able to promote the interests of eloquence, or to establish a form of glory. It is a lost cause. Before the vices, which have been so aptly described, had spread a general infection, all true oratory was at an end. The revolutions in our government and the violence of the times began the mischief, and in the end gave the fatal blow. Nor are we to wonder at this event. In the course of human affairs there is no stability, nothing secure or permanent. As with our minds, as with our bodies, the latter, as soon as they have attained their full growth and seem to flourish in the vigor of health, begin from the moment to feel the gradual approaches of decay. Our intellectual powers proceed in the same manner. They gain strength by degrees, they arrive at maturity, and when they no longer improve, they languish, droop, and fade away. This is the law of nature, of which every age and every nation, of which we have any historical records, have been obliged to submit. There is besides another general law, hard perhaps, but wonderfully ordained, and it is this: nature, whose operations are always simple and uniform, never suffers in any age or country more than one great example of perfection in the kind. This was the case in Greece, the prolific parent of genius and of science. She had but one Homer, one Plato, one Demosthenes. The same has happened at Rome. Virgil stands at the head of his art, and Cicero is still unrivaled. During the space of 700 years our ancestors were struggling to reach the summit of perfection. Cicero at length arose. He thundered forth his immortal energy, and nature was satisfied the wonder she had made. The force of genius could no longer go no further. A new road to fame was to be found. We aimed at wit, and gay conceit, and glittering sentences. The change indeed was great, but it naturally followed the new form of government. Genius died with public liberty. We find that the discourse of men always conforms to the temper of the time. Among savage nations, language is never copious. A few words serve the purpose of barbarians, and those are always uncouth and harsh, without the artifice of connection, short, abrupt, and nervous. In a state of polished society where a single ruler sways the scepter, the powers of the mind take a softer tone, and language grows more refined, but affectation follows, and precision gives way to delicacy, and the just and natural expression is no longer the fashion. Living in ease and luxury, men look for elegance, and hope by novelty to give a grace to adulation. In other nations, where the first principles of the civil union are maintained in vigor, where the people live under the government of laws, and not the will of man, where the spirit of liberty pervades all ranks and orders of the state, where every individual holds himself bound, at the hazard of his life, to defend the constitution framed by his ancestors, where, without being guilty of an impious crime, no man declares to violate the rights of the whole community. In such a state, the national eloquence will be prompt, bold, and animated. Should internal dissensions shake the public peace, or foreign enemies threaten to invade the land, eloquence comes forth, arrayed in terror. She wields her thunder and commands all hearts. It is true that upon those occasions men of ambition endeavor, for their own purposes, to spread the flame of sedition, while the good and virtuous combine their force to quell the turbulent and repel the menaces of a foreign enemy. Liberty gains new strength by the conflict, and the true patriot has the glory of serving his country, distinguished by his valor in the field, and in debate no less terrible by his eloquence. Hence it is that in free governments we see a constellation of orders. Hence Demosthenes displayed the power of his amazing genius and acquired immortal honor. He saw a quick and lively people, dissolved in luxury, open to the seductions of wealth, and ready to submit to a master. He saw a great and warlike monarch threatening destruction to the liberties of his country. He saw that prince had at the head of powerful armies, renowned for victory, possessed an opulent treasury, formidable in battle, and by his secret arts still more so in the cabinet. He saw the king, inflamed by ambition and the lust of dominion, determined to destroy the liberties of Greece. It was at alarming crisis that called forth the powers of Demosthenes. Armed with eloquence, and with eloquence only, he stood out as a bulwark against the combination of enemies, foreign and domestic. He roused his countrymen from their lethargy. He kindled the holy flame of liberty. He counteracted the machinations of Philip, detected his clandestine frauds, and fired the men of Athens with indignation. To effect these generous purposes and defeat the policy of a subtle enemy, what powers of mind were necessary? How vast, how copious, how sublime! He thundered and lightninged in his discourse. He faced every danger with undaunted resolution. Difficulties served only to inspire him with new ardor. The love of his country glowed in his heart. Liberty roused all his powers, and fame held forth her immortal wreath to reward his labors. These were the fine incentives that roused his genius, and no wonder that his mind expanded with vast conceptions. He thought for his country, and, by consequence, every sentiment was sublime. Every expression was grand and magnificent. The true spirit of genuine eloquence, like an intense fire, is kept alive by flesh materials. Every new commotion gives it vigor, and in proportion as it burns, it expands and brightens to a purer flame. The same causes at Rome produce the same effect. Tempestuous times called forth the genius of our ancestors. The moderns, it is true, have taken fire, and rose above themselves, as often as a quiet, settled, and uniform government gave a fair opportunity. But eloquence is certain flourishes most under a bold and turbulent democracy, where the ambitious citizen, who best can mold to his purposes a fierce and contentious multitude, is sure to be the idol of the people. In the conflict of parties that kept our ancestors in agitation, laws were multiplied. The leading chiefs were the favorite demagogues, the magistrates were often engaged in midnight debate, eminent citizens were brought to a public trial, families were set at variance, the nobles were split into factions, and the Senate waged incessant war against the people. Hence the flame of eloquence, which blazed out under the republican government, and hence that constant fuel that kept the flame alive. The state, it is true, has often thrown into convulsions, but talents were exercised, and genius opened the way to public honors. He who possessed the powers of persuasion rose to eminence, and by the arts which gave him popularity, he was sure to eclipse his colleagues. He strengthened his interest with the leading men, and gained weight and influence not only in the Senate, but in all assemblies of people. Foreign nations courted his friendship. The magistrates, setting out for their provinces, made it their business to integrate themselves with the popular speaker, and at their return took care to renew their homage. The powerful orator had no occasion to solicit for preferment. The offices of praetor and consul stood open to receive him. He was invited to those exalted stations. Even the rank of a private citizen, he had a considerable share of power, since his authority swayed at once the Senate and the people. It was in those days a settled maxim that no man could either rise to dignities or support himself in office without possessing, in an eminent degree, power of words and dignity of language. Nor can this be a matter of wonder, when we recollect that persons of distinguished genius were, on various occasions, called forth by the voice of the people, and in their presence obliged to act an important part. Eloquence was the ruling passion of all. The reason is, it was not then sufficiently merely to vote in the Senate. It was necessary to support that vote with the strength of reasoning and a flow of language. Moreover, in all prosecutions, the party accused was expected to make his defense in person, and to examine the witnesses, who at the time were not allowed to speak in written depositions, but were obliged to give their testimony in open court. In this manner, necessity, no less than temptation of bright rewards, conspired to make men cultivate the arts of oratory. He who was known to possess the power of speech was held in the highest veneration. The mute and silent character fell into contempt. The dread of shame was a motive not less powerful than the ambition that aimed at honors. Sink into the humiliating rank of a client, instead of maintaining the dignity of a patron, was a dreaded, degrading thought. Men were unwilling to see the followers of their ancestors transfigured to other families for protection. Above all, they dreaded the disgrace of being thought unworthy of civil honors, and, if by intrigue they attained their wishes, the fear of being despised for incapacity was a spur to quicken their ardor in the pursuit of literary fame and commanding eloquence. I do not know whether you have as yet seen the historical memoirs which Musonius has collected and lately published, containing in 11 volumes the transactions of the time, and in 3 more the letters of eminent men who figured on the stage of public business. This portion of history is well authenticated by the original papers, still extant in the libraries of the curious. From this valuable collection it appears that Pompey and Crassus owed their elevation as much to their talents as their fame in arms, and that Lentulus, Metellus, Lucullus, Cicero, and others of that class took care to enlarge their minds and distinguish themselves by the powers of speech. To say all in one word, no man in those times rose to eminence in the state who had not given proof of his genius in the forum and the tribunals of justice. To this it may be added that the importance of splendor and magnitude of questions discussed in that period served to animate the public orator. The subject, beyond all doubt, lifts the mind above itself. It gives vigor to sentiment and energy to expression. Let the topic of paltry theft, a dry form of pleading, or a petty misdemeanor, will not the orator himself feel cramped and chilled by the meanness of the question? Give him a cause of magnitude, such as bribery in the election of magistrates, a charge for plundering the allies of Rome, or the murder of Roman citizens. How different then is his emotions, how sublime each sentiment, what dignity of language, the effect, it must be admitted, springs from the disasters of society. It is true that that form of government in which no such evils occur must, beyond all questions, be allowed to be the best. But since, in course of human affairs, sudden convulsions must happen, my position is that they produced at Rome that flame of eloquence, which at its hour so much admired. The mind of the orator grows and expands with his subject. Without ample materials, no splendid oration was ever yet produced. Demosthenes, I believe, did not owe his vast reputation to the speeches which he made against his gardeners, nor was it either to the oration in defense of Quasintus, or that of Artius the poet, that established the character of Cicero. It was Catiline, it was Verus, it was Milo and Mark Antony that spread so much glory around him. Let me not be misunderstood. I do not say that for the sake of hearing a bright display of eloquence, it is fit that the public peace should be disturbed by the machinations of turbulent and lawless men, but not to lose sight of the question before us. Let it be remembered that we are inquiring about an art which thrives and flourishes most in tempestuous times. It were no doubt better that the public should enjoy the sweets of peace than be harassed by the calamities of war. But still, it is war that produces a soldier and great commander. It is the same with eloquence. The oftener she is obliged, if I may so express, to take the field, the more frequent the engagement, in which she gives and receives alternate wounds, and the more formidable her adversary, the more she rises in pomp and grandeur, and returns from the warfare of the forum and crowned with unfading laurels. He who encounters danger is ever sure to win the suffrages of mankind, for such is the nature of human mind. That, in general, we choose a state of security for ourselves, but never fail to gaze with admiration on the man whom we see in the conflict of parties facing his adversaries and surmounting difficulties. Call that there. Oh. So the topic of this is the part of the topic of how to speak yourself, ask questions and lead, and it appears as though it's the demands of your environment. So if you are not in an environment that will command you to develop such skills, you need the old wisdom of surrounding yourself by those who are good for you, not those who are bad for you. The eminent wisdom here expressed by Sala. Oh, brilliant speaker. I get. So the corruption of the eloquence came with the corruption of the people. People who, in their seeking of liberty and freedom, started going for luxury items. And we see that in today's collapse. It's who somebody recently described America as a third world country with a Gucci handbag, and that's a pretty apt example. It's the grabbing that luxury, we're making ourselves broke. We need to, and that's broke not just in economic sense, but in a spiritual and a elegant sense. People don't think deeply, speak deeply, in their effort for the luxury of simplicity and to not have to think. People are entertained by simple, not stupid, but simple, plain, lowbrow, less elegant things. People are in spirit, when even the people who are spiritual, quite often they go for the luxuries of spirituality, the joys, but they never go for the responsibilities. And the demands of the time will cause those who do take the burden to bear responsibilities and responsibility for yourself, your community, your neighbors, starting with yourself. Those are the ones who will lead and rise up from the ashes. It's a poetic transformation. So if you want to, well, you need to practice too. So you need to first try and find, maybe the internet's a good place to find lots of these communities. Surround yourself and communicate with people of elegant style and who represent the ancients, who like to represent the ancients. Discord's a great place for that. Just practice it yourself. Try writing or doing a speech in the mirror or on camera, watching it. Analyze yourself, because you don't really realize many of your habits till you start analyzing and watching yourself carefully. You just act out your habits. But if you start analyzing yourself just a little bit and more, you will start to see those, and then you can recognize them and adapt and change and produce a monumentous impact in your life and the lives of others. It's being capable as a speaker, asking questions is a good way to start. Go like asking questions in a humble manner. Asking the right questions. What is the right question is a good question to ask yourself. And follow that path. That path will always lead you upwards in the world. Upward mobility from excellent habits is always a great start. And read old books. There's lots of ancient wisdom as was reflected. I like the summary of the decline and the rise of different societies. It's the demands of nature. Si vi pacem per bellum is what they used to say in old. You want peace, prepare for war. If you want to produce strong men, you need toughness on them. Where would you have the most toughness? Would you rather have the most tough love from? The world and war and an enemy? Or a friend trying to make you stronger? But if you become so weak that you encounter an enemy, then you will be at their disposal. They will completely destroy you or take you. But if you surround yourself with men who make you stronger, people who challenge you, people who build you up by setting an example in a cooperative competition fashion, who can be the nicest, like a gentlemanly habits, opening the door. Who can open the door first and let it be the last one out? That's a friendly competition, and those who win those games develop themselves, and when you encounter a true enemy, you have been butting heads with your friends so much, and hopefully they will be the biggest challenges will be coming from your friends, that when you encounter an enemy, it's not even a challenge, you can just flush them off. The world is full of opportunities to challenge yourself. There's opportunities to experience experience a level of competition that is will build you up and to defend yourself. We live in a land of luxury, and we can use that luxury to either adorn ourselves with prideful ornament and vice, and be slothful until some form of malicious infiltrator, be it a disease or a foreign enemy, that could be like any form of enemy, overruns us and overtakes us. We're competing with each other such an extreme degree, competing in a way that makes it so that enemies can't even stand a chance. And there's no chance they can catch up. If you had two space agencies that were privatized, competing to be the best space agency within your own nation, then any other nation that was trying to compete with you would have to compete against them. You've already got a head up on them because you've got competition at home. You need that fervor, that drive, and you can't have that drive unless you put yourself in a situation where you need it. You need to step out of your comfort zone. If you overmanage your finances and always have loads, try investing. Eventually you'll learn how to invest well, and it will turn out well. If you don't have a good habits with money, then try saving just a little bit. You want to find a balance, and you want to challenge yourself to make the lifestyle changes. And that doesn't mean not going out or anything like that. It means being cautious and just putting money aside and not touching it, making a sacrifice. Sacrifice now for the later. Sacrifice pay your bills. If you have any debt, pay it off. Pay it off quicker. Suffer now, and then when it's gone, you'll have nothing to pay off, and then you can start investing in upward mobility, better habits, learning. These days it's easy to learn online, but accreditation they've got a gatekeeping going on, and it's produce in yourself the willingness and fortitude to want more from yourself. Develop the self-respect to you can do better, and give yourself to become better. Practice leading by, perhaps if there's anything you're good at, sharing your wisdom. If you're really good at a specific game, find somebody who's not good in that game and offer them friendship and help build them up. There's insurmountable value in that. So unending the possibilities of how far you can get if you develop eloquence and develop yourself and recognize the things that degrade, looking for something fantastical and poetic rather than something hard and challenging. If you just go to the movies every Friday to see the latest increase in fantasy, but never take the time to attempt to produce your own, maybe literature on it, then you're nothing but a consumer, and you will be outcompeted, or you will lead to the degradation of your society and be at risk when the walls fall. The walls do always eventually fall. Okay, let's do it. YouTube. Oh, error. American rules, American etiquette and rules of politeness. Let's see how far we're getting in these. I'm going to need more material, and if I start new material at the end of one of these, then I can add 2 more. I don't know how to do this properly yet. The habit of listening. To be a good listener requires that as much cultivation almost as to be a good talker. In fact, listening is really as much a part of the conversation as talking. We should listen even if the one talking is prosy and uninteresting, and the appropriate periods of the conversation make such remarks as would show that we have read and understood all that has been said. We should always show the same courtesy to others we should expect from them ourselves. Hence, we should not make an effort to be interested, whether we are or not. We should make an effort to be interested, whether or not we are. Cheerfulness and animation. No one has a right to go into society unless he can be sympathetic, unselfish, and animating as well as animated. Society demands cheerfulness and unselfishness. And it is the duty of everyone to help make and sustain it in these features. The manner of conversation is quite as important as the matter. Compliments. Compliments are entirely admissible between equals, or from those of superior to those of inferior station. It is always pleasant to know that our friends think well of us, and especially those who are above us. Of course, compliments should be sincere. If they are not, their only flattery should be avoided. The saying of kind things, however, which is perfectly natural to a kind heart, always confers a pleasure and should be cultivated. Never censure a child for a fault without at the same time mentioning some of its good qualities. Studiously avoid all unkindness. Never in a private circle speak of absent ones other than in a complimentary way. Small talk. There is mysterious difficulty about talking well. A man may have done a vast deal of reading, may have a good memory and a sound judgment. He may express his thoughts in elegant language, season his conversation with wit, and be a walking encyclopedia, and after all, be a dull companion. It must be borne in mind that all the world do not read books, and many of those who do never care about them. Everybody, however, loves to talk. When we are weary with toil or tired with thought, we naturally love to chat, and it is pleasant to hear the sound of one's own voice. What we mean by small talk is talk upon common, everyday matters, about the little, trifling, and innocent things of usual occurrence. In short, the vast world of topics upon which every one can talk, and which are as interesting to children and simple-minded persons as the greater questions are to the learned. Many affect a great measure of wisdom by speaking contemptuously of commonplace talk, but it is only affected. Real wisdom makes a man an agreeable companion. Talk upon those topics which appear to interest your hearers most, no matter how common they may be. The real wisdom and power of a conversationalist is shown in making a commonplace topic interesting. Many imagine that it is an easy matter to talk about nothing, or everyday occurrences, but it requires an active and observant mind, and no small share of invaluable good humor. To say something on everything to everybody, if a man is never open to his mouth, this is never to open his mouth, but for the enunciation of some profound aphorism or something that has never been said, if he is to be internally talking volumes and discussing knotty problems, his talk becomes a burden, and he will find that but few of the audience will be willing to listen to him. Small talk obviates the necessity of straining the mind and assuming unnatural attitudes, as though you were exerting your mental powers. It puts the mind at ease. There is no intention of saying anything profound, and nobody is disappointed if you do not. So, in this way time may we be spent agreeably, and to the enjoyment of all. Flattery. Flattery is an ensnaring quality, and leaves a very dangerous impression. It swells a man's imagination, entertains his fancy, and drives him to doting upon his person. He does me devil wrong, says Shakespeare, that wounds me with flatteries of his tongue. Never be guilty of the habit. Testify your respect, your admiration, and your gratitude by deeds rather than words. The former will carry confirmation, while few will believe the latter. Satire and ridicule. Young persons appear most ridiculous when trying to make others ridiculous by satire or ridicule. To such weapons as these, cultivated people never resort. They find too much to correct in themselves to indulge in coarse censure of the foibles and conduct of others. Titles. In addressing persons with titles, always add the name. How do you do, Dr. Griffin? Not, how do you do, Doctor? In addressing foreigners, the reverse of the English rule is observed. No matter what the title of a Frenchman is, he is always addressed as Monsieur, and you never omit the word Madame, whether addressing a duchess or dressmaker. To omit the proper title in society is a sign of ill breeding. Adaptability in conversation. The secret of talking well is to adapt your conversation to your company. Some talk commonplace altogether, while others seek more abstract subjects to the entire exclusion of small talk. One must be able to keenly detect what is interesting to his hearer and govern himself accordingly. How a husband should speak to his wife, of his wife. It is improper for a gentleman to say my wife, except to intimate acquaintances. He should mention her as Mrs. So-and-so. When in private, he may use the expression my dear, or simply the Christian name. How a lady should speak of her husband. She should not say my husband except among intimates. She should designate him by his name, calling him Mr., or a young wife may designate her husband by his Christian name. Never ask impertinent questions. Never betray impertinent questions. Never betray a courtesy to know of the private and domestic affairs of others. 1,000 questions of this sort are asked, which often cause embarrassment. Vulgar exclamations. Such exclamations as the dickens, or mercy, or good gracious, should never be used. If you are surprised or astonished, suppress the fact. Such expressions border closely on profanity. Conversing with ladies. A gentleman should never lower the intellectual standard in conversing with ladies. He should consider them as equal in understanding with himself. A lady of intelligence will not feel complimented by any means if, when you talk to her, you come down to commonplace topics. Things to be avoided. Do not lose your temper in society. Avoid all coarseness and undue familiarity in addressing others. Never attack the character of others in their absence. Avoid all cant. Do not ask the price of articles you observe, except from intimate friends. And then very quietly. Never give officious advice, and especially avoid contradictions and interruptions. Chapter 10. Table etiquette. Manners are made for the convenience and comfort of men. All social observances are founded upon good reason and common sense. It may seem to us that society has adopted a great many useless customs, but generally speaking, it is not so, for the observance of these customs will enable us to be more agreeable, or at least not disagreeable, to friends. To distinguish between the gentleman and the bore is more clearly noted at the table than anywhere else. Nothing reflects more upon home training than bad manners here. If then we would merit the title of lady or gentleman, it is necessary that we may be able, naturally and easily, to show our good breeding by gentility at the table. Here especially may be said that good manners cannot be assumed for an occasion. Children must be taught by parents, both by precept and example, to be attentive and polite to each other at every meal, to observe proper rules of etiquette regularly. If they are so taught, there is no danger that they will ever appear rude, awkward, or unmannerly when they are entertaining or are entertained as guests. Thus, this everyday encouragement of the observance of simple, sensible table manners promotes the comfort and cultivation of the family and takes the embarrassment out of improper occasions. Cheerfulness in the dining room. The hour of dining should be made an hour of solid comfort. The dining room, the table, and all appurtenances should be as cheerful as possible. The room should be comfortable, bright, and cozy. And at the table, the mistress should wear her brightest smile. If you have trials and troubles, do not bring them to the table. They impair digestion and send husband and children to business and to school glum and gloomy instead of refreshed and strengthened. It was always one of General Washington's rules of politeness never to talk upon a sad and dispiriting subject at the table, rather to make conversation jovial and jocular. Taste will add beauty to the plainest room. Neatness and skill will add appetite to the homeliest fare. Little attendance to the decorations or pretty arrangement of the table will charm the eye and whet the appetite and make the home table powerfully attractive. Children's manners. Rudeness and ugliness from children at the table should not be permitted. Bad manners should be restrained at all places. More especially should children be required to observe the rules of common politeness at table. They should be regularly taught to say, "Will you please?" "I thank you," etc. Not only when they are away from home, or when company is present, but constantly at their own home table. It then becomes a habit. All habits of eagerness and greediness in eating should be carefully guarded against, and all persons should learn by their training to make their manners at the table especially attractive and agreeable. It is not a purpose here to write special rules of etiquette to be observed at social dinners and important receptions, of the duties of the host and hostess on such occasions, and the like, but rather to speak of common rules of table manners which are to be observed constantly in the family, at home, or abroad. To this end we can probably say more in the short space of time by bringing under one head general rules on table etiquette. When you are at the table, do not show restlessness by fidgeting in your seat, or moving your feet about unnecessarily. Do not play with the table utensils or crumble the bread. This is annoying to persons who have been trained correctly in use. Do not put your elbows on the table, or sit too far back or lounge. Do not talk loudly or boisterously. Be cheerful in conduct and conversation. Never, if possible, cough or sneeze at the table. Do not bend the head low down over the plate. The food should go to the mouth, not the mouth to the food. Never tilt back your chair while at the table, or at any other time. Do not be conspicuously careful as to your clothing. It is very properly regarded as impolite to manifest regret for any accident that may have befallen your dress. Good manners require that as little attention as possible be paid to these, then one should turn the conversation as quickly as possible to another subject. Do not talk when the mouth is full. Never make noise while eating. Do not open the mouth while chewing, but keep the lips closed. It is not necessary to show persons how you masticate your food. Never indicate that you notice anything unpleasant in the food. Chew your food well, but quietly and slowly. Break your bread when not buttered. Do not bite or cut it. Do not break your bread into soup, nor mix with gravy. It is bad taste to mix food on the plate. Never leave the table before the rest of the family or guests, without asking the host or hostess to excuse you. Eat soup from the side of a spoon, without noise. The fork is used to convey the food to the mouth, except when a spoon is necessary for liquids. Raw oysters are eaten with a fork. If you wish to be served with more tea or coffee, place your spoon in your saucer. Tea or coffee should never be poured into the saucer to cool, but sipped from the cup. If a dish is passed to you, serve yourself first and then pass it on. You cannot do better in closing this chapter than to quote from an eminent authority in housekeeping etiquette. Let no one suppose that because she lives in a small house and dines on a homely fare, the general principles here laid down do not apply to her. A small house is more easily kept clean than a palace. Taste may be quite as well displayed in the arrangement of dishes on a pine table as in grouping the silver and china of the rich. Skill in cooking is as readily shown in a baked potato or johnny cake as in a canvas back duck. The charm of good housekeeping lies in the nice attention to the little things, not the superabundance. Chapter 11. Street Etiquette. True, politeness is not a garment that can be put on and off at pleasure. It is a habit, pursued persistently until it is grown into the nature and become abiding. On the streets, in public conveyances, amid the jostling crowd, beneath the care and fret of work, as well as in the sunshine of the drawing room, it is ever present. The true gentleman and lady are always kind and courteous to all. They meet regarding not merely the rights of others, but even their wishes and feelings. While the gentleman can render aid, he kindly gives it. Nor does he ever fail in respect for ladies, for his superiors in age and rank. Let no one hesitate in acts of politeness for fear he will not meet with a proper recognition in return. If courtesy is answered by neglect or insult, whose fault is that except the boorish person? Ostentation. Do not try to show yourself off upon the streets. A true secret of street deportment is to do so nearly as other people do, that you attract no special attention. Peculiar and affecting gait, or swinging of the cane, cocking of the head to one side, wearing the hat on one ear, holding a cigar in an effective manner, many other similar things are evident marks of verdancy and shallowness. Hallooing and boisterous talking and laughing are to be avoided. Salutations. Salutations vary in the street, vary with circumstances. In some cases, we simply bow. In others, we bow and touch the hat. Words of greeting may or may not accompany the salutation. Generally, gentlemen should lift the hat from the head in saluting ladies, or men entitled to great respect. Whom to recognize. No one, while walking the streets, should fail, either through carelessness or willful neglect, to recognize acquaintances. When a gentleman meets a gentleman acquaintance in company with a lady whom he does not know, he lifts his hat as he salutes them both. If acquainted with the lady, he salutes her first. A gentleman should return a salutation addressed to her, the lady he accompanies. No gentleman can fail to return a salutation addressed to him by a lady. The first to bow. In this country, it is customary for a gentleman to bow and lift his hat to every lady acquaintance whom he meets, and if she is well bred, she will return the greeting. The salutations can usually be simultaneous. The cut an acquaintance by refusing to return a salutation should be avoided, except perhaps where a lady finds it necessary to use severe means to rid herself of troublesome would-be gentlemen. Keep to the right. In passing people, turn to the right. Be a gentleman walking alone should give the preferred part of the walk to a lady, to a superior in age or station, or to a person carrying a burden. Inquisitiveness. When you meet or join an acquaintance on the street, ask no intrusive questions about where he is going or where he has been, or about any packages he may be carrying. Let him make the first advance on these themes. Find curiosities indelicate, even if the victim be your most intimate friend. Keeping step. Persons walking together on the street should keep step, especially if walking arm in arm. Lady and gentleman walking together. A gentleman walking with a lady may take either side of the walk, but he will always give her the preferred side, or that on which she will be least exposed to crowding, usually the side towards the wall. On having crossed the street, to unlock arms and interchange positions is too formal. Under ordinary circumstances, it is not customary for a gentleman and lady to walk in streets arm in arm in the daytime, unless they be husband and wife, or are otherwise closely related, as parent and son or daughter. But in the evening, or when her safety or comfort seem to require it, the gentleman will offer a lady his arm, and she should accept. Stopping people in the street. It is uncivil to stop a person in the street to speak on business of your own. An inferior should on no pretense detain a superior, nor a gentleman a lady. If you wish to speak about something interesting to both, turn and walk the same way as the person you meet is going. The gentleman must always observe this rule when he wishes to confer with a lady. When he has finished what he has to say, he leaves her with a bow and a lift of the hat. It is optional with a lady whether she shall stop to speak. When two gentlemen who are intimate friends meet, and there is a mutual desire to stop and converse, they may of course do so, provided they retire to the side of the walk. If you stop a friend who has a stranger with them, apologize to the stranger. An introduction is not necessary. When on your way to a fulfillment of an engagement, if a friend stops you, you may excuse yourself courteously, mention the fact that you have an engagement. Where to look? Look in the way you are going, both to avoid collisions and because it is bad manners to stare at any other direction. If you chance to see an acquaintance at the window, or you should bow, but by all means, do not stare into the houses. Avoid looking full into the faces of strangers whom you meet, especially of ladies. Shopping etiquette. Say to the salesman, please show me such an article, or use some other polite form of expression. Avoid doing. Never give insult by offensively suggesting that you can do better elsewhere. Do not needlessly consume the time of the clerk and keep other customers waiting. If you find friends in the store, it is uncivil to interrupt them in any manner while they are making their purchases. Above all, do not volunteer your criticism either upon their taste or upon the goods. It is exceedingly rude to the salesman to sneer at or depreciate his wares. If you do not see what you want, you are not satisfied with the prices, quietly retire. In public, conveyances, one should do nothing to discommode or annoy his fellow passengers. No gentleman will keep his seat while ladies are standing for want of room, nor will he keep other gentlemen standing by occupying necessary space. A lady, on accepting a seat from a gentleman, will thank him. Never engage in loud conversation or argument. Such goods will attract the attention of other passengers. Gentlemen will not stretch their feet into the passageway. Joining a lady on the street. A gentleman should not join a lady acquaintance on the street for the purpose of walking with her, unless he ascertains that his company will be perfectly agreeable to her. Carrying packages. A gentleman walking with a lady will offer to carry any package she may have in her hand. He may even accost a lady whom he sees overburdened and tender his assistance. Opening the door. If practicable, a gentleman should open the door for a lady to enter first, be it the lady accompanying him or a stranger. He should never pass before a lady unless it is unavoidable. Even then, be sure to apologize. The gentleman will answer politely any questions from a lady, at the same time lifting his hat. Street looker. No gentleman is ever guilty of standing in public places and offensively gazing at ladies as they pass. Smoking. A gentleman should not smoke while he is walking with a lady, nor will he smoke in conveyance or room where ladies are present. When a gentleman and lady are walking together, if on account of the crowd, or for any other reason, they must proceed singly, the gentleman should proceed, except in descending a flight of stairs. Comparison. Are you supposed to go before? The gentleman should proceed, except in descending a flight of stairs. So, gentleman first, unless there's... Okay. Street manners of a lady. The true lady walks the streets unostentatiously and with becoming reserve. So long as she maintains this character, she is sacred from insult or injury. Given by the rulers, she recognizes acquaintance with a courteous bow and friends with words of greeting. She appears unconscious of all sights and sounds which a lady ought not to perceive. Asking and receiving favors. A lady never demands favors from a gentleman, but accepts them gracefully when offered. She may with perfect propriety accept aid of a stranger entering or alighting from a conveyance. She should acknowledge the courtesy with a bow or thanks. Avoiding carriages. For a lady to run across the street before a carriage is inelegant and dangerous. A lady never forms acquaintances of gentlemen on the streets, nor does she do anything to court their attention. Walking alone in evening. A young lady should never walk the street alone after dark. Alright, that's a good place, isn't it? Okay. Etiquette. Clearly, of course, they had carriages, and now we have cars. Lift your hat. I'm trying to think of anything I could add. Loud music in public is not a good thing when you're walking. I didn't know that men was supposed to go in front of a woman in a crowd. Break the path. That makes sense. Usually you're just trying to make things easier for other people, and gentlemen. Do what you can to be most accommodating to those around you. It's a basic rule. It's like ladies are to be treated as delicate. I mean, they have lots of work they have and responsibilities, so making their lives easier is definitely, I mean, women are a conveyor of social regulation, and it's a serious burden, so what we can do to help them is definitely appreciable in general terms at the very least. But, yeah, when you're in public, I'm just trying to think, because let's go through a few topics. Eating at the dinner table, yeah, I have sitting in your chair just in general. It's a good habit to get into. Posture is very good for you. Posture. Stand up straight, shoulders back. That's a perfect habit to start developing if you're going to start anywhere. dinner table conversations and small talk is very important. I know I'm definitely guilty of not commencing with small talk or entertaining too many of the guests or people around you. So if I have a conversation that some are enjoying, I have definitely been guilty of picking the ones who are agreeable to it, and rather than trying to find topics agreeable to everyone and spending time on that. That is definitely a concern. They're talking about people poorly behind their back. Some of these habits I've learned, I don't think I do it too often. I know I've done it on stream actually, at least once or twice. It's embarrassing. When you know better, it's all that more embarrassing to make the mistakes. So it's quite important to develop the habit. And it's never too late to start. I know it starts at home with children, but you need to lead, right? So start with yourself. It'll make you more agreeable and give you better provision in society, better circumstance. So that's a significant thing. Rudeness in conversation. Arguing incessantly is a serious issue. My breaches in etiquette have been complaining about people who have argued incessantly with me about something. If a disagreement exists, like, I guess it's just been, it's like one gentleman was trying to convince me is just incessantly trying to change my mind on something every time we talked at one point, so that he could use me to do stuff, like trying to get me to do free work for him. And it was incessant, and that's poor breeding. So you want to avoid, if you have a disagreement with somebody, don't keep bringing it up. And if you want something from somebody and they've already said no, don't keep bringing it up. Accept a no. It's very, very rude to refuse a no from somebody. If you want help with something and you can't get it from somebody, move on to somebody else. I mean, you can't be overbearing and rude and entitled in such a fashion. And it just shows truly poor breeding to do that. I like the note about if somebody's going on a topic you know lots about, politely just say something suggesting you understand the material or you've read the material, so it's not new to you. That's a very smooth way. Wait for a pause and do that. And politely. Okay, I know. Yeah. Well, not I know, but like if it's a topic that you've expressed a lot, be like, yeah, no, I definitely found that when I read this, just to express that, and perhaps a pivoting in the conversation. If you are any good at leading, leg, lead, pace. Leg, pace, lead. I've noticed that in this etiquette. So, pace them by mentioning that you are learned on it. Maybe lag behind them, ask them a question, and then pace them. So, get them to express just something. Have you read this, maybe, and then pace them by expressing enough that you know about it, and then lead by pivoting the conversation to what's more agreeable to the group or yourself. Just if you can carefully, politely make things more agreeable and pleasant for everyone around you, that is the ultimate goal. As a person who is, if you're developing the habit of leadership, that's a good place to start. If you notice a conversation is being brought somewhere that's making somebody uncomfortable, you can try and take the reins a little bit and bring it somewhere that might be more agreeable, bring it further away from that, politely and carefully and succinctly. There's a tact involved, and first you have to develop polite habits. I mean, that's not you can't lead if you're not polite. When the opening the door thing is like out of the street, don't don't stare into windows. When you meet strangers, that's a good point. When you meet friends or acquaintances and friends, I like the distinguishment. I think that's been blurred due to social media because on Facebook, most of your friends are probably just acquaintances. So that's a point to keep in mind. So the politeness is extremely powerful. Like etiquette is more powerful than law. It gets you so much further. I've known that even I, who have poor etiquette in many ways, have often been I've been exalted and given station far above my deservedness in social environments due to people recognizing some level of manners that I have inherited. I've definitely lost quite a few. The home manners, out in public and at home, it's definitely a dichotomy that I don't have, is at home has been different for me historically, so I have a lot of work to self-respect, right? Instead of eating anywhere, eat at the table, make it nice, make it agreeable, clean your environment. There's all kinds of little details that go into treating yourself like a guest. I guess that's what it comes down to. It's game theory. Do what's best for others and you, not what's best for others at the cost of you or best for the cost of others. So if you would treat others sufficiently polite that you would clean up and make a nice environment before you ate and present the meal in a nice fashion, do that for yourself. Take the time to do some things for yourself like that. And you will find that you are happier for it. You are more disciplined, and when it comes to other people, if you are in the habit of treating yourself well like that, then you'll be treating others well. So that is a serious case to be made for doing that, practicing the habit of proper etiquette at home, at the table, in public, when making acquaintances, when introducing yourself to people, when giving up your seat to a lady will never, you've seen, it will never be considered impolite. It's a practice that if you have your own woman, then all of a sudden you are making yourself look that much more agreeable to her. If you have a seat next to your woman and there's another woman who could use it, stand up, offer your seat. It's like, ladies and gentlemen are not as common as they used to be. And building society back up after technology has brought luxury to the point that we have fallen over ourselves will take serious effort by devoted individuals, and those individuals will be exalted for their effort by the grand impact it'll have on their lives and the lives of those around them. I'm gone. I was under for the first two, and now I'm up to 134. We'll call it there. I think I'm running out of ability to talk on this one topic because I went over on the other topics. So have a good one.